Hey everybody, Matt here for AVC and welcome back to the shop. You know, ever since we did our UNISTRUT install video, we've been getting lots of questions of why we like UNISTRUT over L-Track. So we thought we'd do a special video just for you. Let's get to work. So first, let's take a look at L-Track because it's more of the industry standard. So van life has really popularized L-Track and we see it all over the place in lots of different builds. Now it is a good product and it definitely has good uses, and let's hit some of the pros for L-Track just so we can understand why so many people use it. The first and easiest thing to know about L-Track is it's really easy to actually tie down cargo. That's what L is for load. It's load track. It's meant for tying down cargo in vehicles, things like that. Airline or aircrafts actually use it to put seats. Next time you're on an airplane, take a look at your feet. You'll see some L-Track on the floor there. And all these fittings fit into L-Track, you know, without having to do tools, which is pretty cool. So if you're just looking to tie down mountain bikes, tie down a motorcycle, tie down some cargo in the back of your van, L-Track is probably the right solution. But when it comes down to bolting something into L-Track, you know, that's where we have to buy some of these fittings and things like that. And we can secure things down permanently. You know, we can tighten this up with a tool, and that's a really nice thing to do. One of the things about tying things down is it's indexed. So these little tabs that go along, you know, they go every inch. And so wherever we want to put that tie down has to be on the inch increment. Now when we're tying something down with a ratchet strap, something like that, it's really no big deal and we're happy to do that. But when we're hard mounting a cabinet, that means our cabinet has to be specifically designed around the L-Track. And we need to have holes on the 1 inch increment. Because if things don't quite line up with the L-Track, it's not going to line up with your hardware. Now the quick fittings are really nice. If you are tying something down, you know, it's actually probably the perfect solution for your van. So as you can see behind me in the van here, we have L-Track in the floor, and that's because we want to be able to tie down cargo underneath the bed, and so we still use it here. And the captured edges make it look really nice in a floor. So when you look at the profile of this L-Track, you can see these little wings, and they're going to capture that unfinished edge of our flooring, or in some other wall kits on the market, the wall kit tucks behind these little edges, so they're nice and clean edge, and it hides all those little unfinished edges. Another thing about L-Track is it's lighter. You know, aluminum is going to be lighter than steel. That's just all there is to it. Another thing when it comes to steel versus aluminum is corrosion resistance. Now, if we cut this piece of L-Track, I can just mount it in the van. We don't have to anodize it. We don't have to worry about sealing that edge. It's not going to be an issue. If we did that to UNISTRUT, we would have to prime and seal that edge so it won't get rust in our vehicle. But in the grand scheme, you know, L-Track, if we did the same amount of L-Track as we did UNISTRUT, and in the van right here we have about 26 feet of UNISTRUT, we're at about 25 pounds heavier than if we did it all in L-Track. So this section of L-Track, I put it on the scale, it weighs 14 ounces, and the same length of UNISTRUT weighed 1 pound 14 ounces. So it's, you know, for a 16-inch piece, it's about 1 pound heavier. So not the biggest deal, and we do use a 12-gauge UNISTRUT, so it's a little bit thicker UNISTRUT here in the shop. But you know, weight is always a consideration, but on the whole, we're only looking at about 25 pounds, and for a van, it's not that big a deal. So now that we've covered some of the things we like about L-Track, let's talk about some of the things that aren't so great about L-Track. The biggest thing is that everything is special about L-Track, and although sometimes that's nice, when it comes to our pocketbook, that's not so nice. So you know, if we want to buy something like this, you know, an L-Track specific fitting, these go in for about $5 a piece. And we can get them a little bit cheaper if we buy them in bulk. I'm sure they're a little bit cheaper out there, but I did a quick Google, and that's what they were coming in at today. Which means, you know, that's a pretty good price increase from a standard bolt to something like this. The other thing that comes along with specialty hardware is delivery times. I can't run down to the hardware store and pick a lot of this stuff up. So if I'm in a pinch, or if I'm trying to finish a project this weekend, chances are I'm going to have to postpone it till the delivery guy can bring something new to me at the shop. One of the things about L-Track and it being aluminum is it's just not going to be as strong as steel. Now, there are specific formulations of aluminum that they use for seating. If you're going to use this for seats, make sure you get the right formula. It's not just the standard cargo stuff you're going to see around. The other is just that aluminum's cantilever strength is not the same as steel. So if I put one bolt here in the middle, we're going to get more deflection on this aluminum than we are going to get with steel. And when this deflects, it's going to stay bent, whereas the steel is going to rebound and the aluminum is going to stay deformed. And in some ways, aluminum is harder to work with. Now I can cut this on a chop saw, so if I need to cut it down to length, it's a little bit easier to deal with than getting out the cutoff wheel to cut some steel. But if I need to drill in here and I need to mount this in a specific location and it's not indexed on these 1-inch increments, it can be pretty tough. And when you're working with a Ford Transit and we're trying to use the stock bolts that are in there from the factory, unfortunately, the L-track does not line up perfectly with those holes. So it can be a little bit tougher to deal with. And the last thing that I don't really like about L-track is it's just one look. You know, there's not a lot of variation in the market. Now there are different form factors. We can get the chamfered edge, we can get a square form, we can get the piece with the lips here. But in general, it looks like L-track. So no matter what you're doing, it's gonna look like L-track. Now onto UNISTRUT. Now some of the information we're gonna be telling you here for UNISTRUT is gonna be a little redundant with our UNISTRUT install video, but we have a little more time to look at some of the finer points of UNISTRUT and the differences between this and L-track, so I encourage you to stay tuned. So now over to UNISTRUT. So UNISTRUT is new to van life, but by no means is it new to the building industry. So this stuff is used in commercial buildings to hang conduit, electrical boxes, a lot of utilities, things like that. And after you have seen it and are familiar with what the product is, you're gonna start seeing it a lot more around in your area. Now we use UNISTRUT because it's available locally. I can pick this up at a big box store. I can pick it up from an electrical supplier. Now I do order it by the pallet, and so we get a lot of it shipped in. But in a pinch, I can run down to our local big box store and pick some up. I can even run to our local Ace Hardware and pick some up. So it is available just about everywhere. The other nice thing is hardware is also available everywhere. So just about any hardware store I've ever walked into has UNISTRUT parts available, as well as hardware that fits into it. Because this strut nut that just pops in here is 3/8, and you can get 3/8 hardware everywhere you go. So if I need a new bolt, I need a longer bolt, I need something to work with it, they're available locally and they're usually pretty darn cheap. This bolt was 8 cents compared to some of the L-track fittings that are over 10 times that, 50 times that. Along with hardware being cheaper, UNISTRUT itself is cheaper too. So I think I paid $20 for a 10-foot stick of UNISTRUT at our big box store, which is pretty cheap. These are generally, for a 92-inch piece, is about $65 plus shipping. So we're looking at a much costlier part. So UNISTRUT is definitely cheaper on the whole if you're doing it yourself as a DIY. One of the biggest features and reasons we use UNISTRUT here is it's universally adjustable. So if I pop this strut nut in and I plan to hang my cabinet at this position, but then I get everything kind of in and I realize, oh man, I really wish I could just shift that back 1/4 of an inch. I can just slide this back 1/4 of an inch along with all the other fittings that my cabinet bolts in with and bolt the thing in. So it's really easy to work with. I can drill holes because it's a solid back as well, and we don't have these little indexed openings in the front. If I need to drill a hole to line up with the 8mm Zerts in my Ford Transit, I can do that. I can just mark out where I need to and drill that hole and then bolt it into the vehicle. It's super easy. Also, UNISTRUT, the way that it's manufactured and made, is going to be stronger than L-track. It just is. The cantilever strength is far superior. So if I have a bolt here and I'm putting tension on the end here and this is not captured, this is going to be a stronger situation than L-track. So for our purposes, sometimes we have to cantilever these parts in the van and it's going to be much stronger. One of the other reasons we really like it here in the shop is the variety of hardware. So I can get strut nuts in all sorts of different thread patterns and styles. This is a 3/8 short spring strut nut, and that can just pop right in here into this 3300. This is a 1/2-inch strut nut, so it uses 1/2-inch hardware. If I want to get a little bit bigger hardware in there, I can do that. It's available down to 1/4 inch. It's probably available even more than that, just I haven't really paid attention because we don't use that small of hardware here in the shop. But this one is even available without a spring. So I can fasten that into my bolt, I can just spin it in place, and then I can tighten it up until my part is tight and in place. So no springs required. So although we think UNISTRUT is great, and we love to use it to bolt in all of our cabinetry, things like that, it's not necessarily the right choice for every application. So, as we covered before on some of the pro-con things, it is a little bit heavier than L-track, right? It is steel. We use a 12-gauge steel version here. It's going to be the strongest available, but it is heavier. On a whole, the van is going to be about 25 pounds heavier if we use UNISTRUT in place of L-track in all those positions. Because it's steel, and the same reason that it's heavier, steel is going to need to be coated. Now we buy this super green here in the shop. It's phenolic resin coated. It's green. It's actually rated for direct burial outside, so it's really great product. But anywhere we cut the end, it's going to be raw steel. So we're going to have to prime and seal this in. Now we take all of ours and get it powder coated here locally. But if you're doing this at home, you got to make sure you seal those ends so that you're not going to get rust on your product. As a DIYer, you might be a little apprehensive to use some UNISTRUT because it's just not the van life standard. You know, we look at all these pretty pictures on Instagram, and everybody has L-Track going everywhere in their van. But I'm going to encourage you to look deeper into UNISTRUT, because I think it's going to be the right choice for you. Or the last thing that I'd like to point out between the two is that the profile of L-Track is a little bit shallower than our UNISTRUT. Now, this comes into play especially when we're looking at a recessed version, something that can sit below the surface of something. And in applications like our floor, that's the exact reason we actually don't use UNISTRUT in our floor. I'd love to use UNISTRUT in our floor, but because it doesn't have like an encapsulated version or a little edge that could capture the flooring, it's just not going to look as pretty on the floor. And so we use that recessed version of L-Track in our floors because it's just great. So for the longest time here at AVC, we would put a piece of chamfered L-Track in the roof of our van on the passenger side to bolt in the ceiling. Now we put a piece of UNISTRUT to bolt in our cabinets on the driver's side, but we wanted something to bolt into the ceiling to offer the same amount of tension on the ceiling panels, so we had a nice solid curve. And we wanted something that looked purposeful and looked like an industry standard, and so we were using L-Track. Now everybody'd look at it and say, oh, why do we have this up here? And we'd put up clotheslines, we'd hang things from it, but really hanging bags from it or hanging a cabinet from it just wasn't the right application. And the reason we did it is because it just looked prettier, and everybody's used to it. It has nice end caps that make it look like a more finished application, but we designed an end cap for our UNISTRUT, so we can pop this on the end of our UNISTRUT and have a nice finished look to the edge. So if we do have a raw edge of UNISTRUT hanging out in the van, it looks finished and purposeful, and looks like we really want it to be there. It looks prettier. So let's review. We have two great products here, L-Track and UNISTRUT, and each has their place in van life. Now, if we're going to bolt in cabinets and utilities and we want something permanently mounted to the van, I think UNISTRUT is our way to go. It's going to be stronger, safer, and a more universal, easy to do system for a DIYer. And if we need a place to temporarily tie down cargo, add something in place, or have something recessed on the floor, L-Track is going to be the way to go. So that's it. This is my take on L-Track versus UNISTRUT. If you have a different opinion, or maybe you see something that I didn't point out about the two, let us know in the comments below. I'd love to have a chat with you about it. If you thought this video was helpful, please hit that like button so others can find it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it. It's time. We'll see you on the next video.